It's the SGG podcast. We're here at the podcasters. Say hello and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Elsa Tahura.
I'm Peter Lawrence.
I'm Kyle Bacher, and today we're going to talk about release plus one. Day one of a release.
Yes.
A release of an app, a site, product, something. You know, the day after the project deadline, or the day of, depending on how you measure it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
If it goes live at 4 a.m, does it still count as the next day at 8 a.m?
Yes. So leading up that last week, before day one, I kind of want to start there.
Yeah.
So
The red zone.
Is that a crazy week or is it a light week? Because
Yes.
you're so ready. You're just so ready that, like, okay, we're going to just polish up some documents and do some communications, get rid of all the consultants.
No. I'll jump in here. So
Yeah.
with Agile, on an Agile project, that last week, that last X before going live has toned down so much. I remember back in the day, we were working on an app for 8-9 months before a release, and we didn't send it over to QA until 7 months after we started developing it, so that they could start finding all the bugs that we'd sprinkled around and then go back and clean them out. But now with Agile, all that's happening all the time. And we're doing, releases once every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, maybe do 2 sprints and then do a release every other sprint. The week before is it's so much more mellow than back in the day. I mean, I remember so many times just going right up until the final hour, the final second, and doing all these massive changes at midnight or 1 a.m. after you're just dead tired, just to make, the launch date. And that has changed, thankfully, for the better, with a more agile approach. You're doing a lot smaller pieces a lot more often, and it makes things easier. That's my experience. Al, how about you?
I would say I've experienced all parts of the spectrum. I have been lucky to be a part of many more agile projects that are very similar to what you described, Peter, where we're not only dealing with smaller chunks of work, but that tends to also mean the releases are better planned out, or at least that information is more clearly disseminated to everybody.
Absolutely.
And that is glorious. I wish every project could be like that. I've had projects that are kind of more traditional waterfall, where it is just that last week going up to release is exponentially increasing your stress every day.
Yeah, you've planned it all along. That date has been circled in red and green and yellow and all the different colors over time, and you're trucking right along, and that date isn't moving, and it's there, but somehow all the overtime happens that last week.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a date that's picked 9, 18, however many months ago.
Yeah.
And it's
arbitrarily.
And it's based on people's best estimates from 18 or more months ago. So it's the classic problem of, okay, this is now inevitably, because it always does, changed into a slightly different application or a different project than what we first envisioned, but we still have the constraints and deadlines of the original project. And that is, I mean, if I could avoid it, I would, but that is kind of just part of the job.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, it seems like an arbitrary deadline, but it's really about a window of opportunity.
Absolutely.
To not destroy your people.
Yeah, or alienate your customers.
Yeah. Like the 6 months leading up to this date are our busiest time of the year when they're doing all the whatever. That doesn't end until this date. That's when they come up for air. Mm-hmm. And they have air for a month. So we got to get it in there. Otherwise, we got to do another orbit around the Earth.
Right.
And wait for our next window. So that's where the hard date comes in.
Yeah.
Or this is when our license renewal happens for the old expensive thing.
Yep.
We don't want to pay it.
Yep.
Seen that before.
We don't want to pay it so much that we're going to pay 3 times that to bring in 3 more people so that we hit the deadline. It is what it is. And you hope that it's not an unreasonable demand,
right?
Like to hit that date. And some, it's weird. I think with Agile, you're doing more kind of, as we called in the restaurant, cleaning as you go.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're taking care of things along the way. And it's like chunks of productivity. There's no 11th hour with Agile where where everybody then kicks into gear. It seems like, more traditional projects, it wasn't really real. Like it was kind of a relaxed vibe for a while. And
some more engagement of everybody involved all the way
and then
through.
The closer you get, the higher the stress levels go. And all of a sudden you got to kick in, and then you got to go into overdrive and start working those longer hours and start pushing people harder. And I think Agile's been good for kind of mitigating those situations.
Nobody works overtime the first week of a 18-month project.
Nope.
Right.
Even though you all know it's going to be at the end. So why not front load it a little bit? Nope. It's not there yet.
Yeah.
So far
it's
away.
It's because you can't get enough meetings scheduled that quickly for that first week.
That's right.
And decide there's a lot of planning that needs to happen. Like you need that smaller team that does all that pre-planning, and then you start adding like groups or people to the project, and when you have stuff for them to do.
Yeah, and you need that sort of initial set of requirements available so that the rest of us can start poking holes in it. It's a lot easier, like, okay, here's where the problems are going to be from a starting point than just imagine a perfect world where this software will come into existence.
Right.
There's challenges. If you decide you're going to just let the BA handle the requirements gathering kind of in a bubble and then bring your devs in later and drop all that on your devs. It's like, well, while we were gathering requirements, we might have been able to push back on some things to really help shorten our, do you really need to do it that way? Because the system works this other way. Would that work for you? Because it's going to be 80 hours of development work to do the same thing exactly the way you want to do it, instead of going with the flow and this way the system works. But if you're a BA, you might not know that stuff. So I think Agile, you involve the developers right away, don't you?
Always. Yep.
Yeah.
Everything's up front. Everybody's involved all the way through, product owners and developers and QA. Everybody should be at the same table talking about the same things all the way through, in a perfect world, obviously. But, and it really, it really does bring everything together. As we were talking earlier about, some of the hard deadlines that we've proposed far off. And I remember listening to a story about NASA, right? And landing things on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And when you land things on Mars, the like you said, Kyle, the planets sort of go around at a known frequency, and you got to time that just right. And so their projects obviously ramp up right before launch, right? And one of the things that came up and people noticed was there was a problem with this, the lander. Well, are we worried about the lander? No, not right now. We're worried about launch. We got to launch this thing before we can worry about the lander. So they got everything ready for launch, and then everybody's like, oh, phew. And then they forgot about the lander. And this was a conversion factor from metric to English units, and they crashed because one was feeding English units to something that was expecting metric, or vice versa.
Almost like we should all be on metric, but
well, I think like our
another
science,
podcast,
right?
our
Yeah.
science supposedly got on, like science went metric, but maybe NASA was behind.
Well, and
or this was during the transition,
because they were contracting with different agencies in different countries, and so that just it's like miles per hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
When is the U.S. going to switch from miles per hour? I have no idea, but my speedometers always have a little button that lets me switch, but my speed limit signs
don't
traditionally
have miles per hour.
Yeah.
I went to Canada with my mom one time, and for five minutes, I had her convinced that Canadian time was different, and there was only 10 hours in a day because they were on metric time. And she was like, really? And it was cruel. But then she realized I was full of it and smacked me.
She remembered who she was talking to, right?
Like, that's right. I raised you.
I'm talking to my son, Kyle.
Metric
He's
time.
lying to me again.
Liar.
But that does make me wonder, though, with your example, Peter, that there's stress that you can perhaps mitigate by kind of spreading out. Okay, these are the things we need to worry about. And with Agile, you might have that more built-in system where, okay, yeah, we can spread out our concerns across different sprints so that it's not, here's a week where everyone has absurdly high blood pressure.
Yes.
But there's part of that also that can make post-deployment easier too, because I think about deployments that I've done in the past where the lead up to release has been immensely stressful. Mm-hmm. And then we all releases, and then we all take like a deep breath because, all right, well, we didn't break anything. Like just the paranoia.
And you only have to hold that breath for a while, and then if there's no giant bug reports coming in, you're like, but otherwise
that's just like the next day there's still sort of some of that stress because
lots of tension.
It feels like, okay, in a week we didn't have enough time to really think through all of these potential problems, and so it still feels like I have to be in emergency mode because we didn't spread this out to give us time to think it through.
I got bit by not doing sufficient load testing on a project.
Yeah.
And everything loaded fine when 5 people were hitting it.
Yep.
And they said, okay, now 120 people start using it on day 1.
Did you tell them all to start at 8 a.m. too at the same time to really hammer it?
Yeah. Some of the parts of the page aren't loading, and it's not the same parts every time. And it's happening to everybody, but not all the time. But
right.
And so I'm just like, just starting to shake. Blood pressure increasing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there's the like gotcha things that, okay, this wasn't part of the testing, so it was inevitably going to happen
right
anyway because we didn't see it coming. And with things like load testing, often then you get into a conversation with the organization about, okay, so we're going to do load testing on all of our future projects. And the response can sometimes be, that's too complicated, that's too expensive, that we don't have time to do. So thinking about like a situation like that, Kyle, I think post-release, what are things, are there things as an organization or as just a member of a team that you can do to make those types of events less mentally destroying?
Yeah. Well, and it kind of depends on what you have available
Totally.
to do.
A good rollback strategy. That'll help.
There you
Like
go. Yeah.
what we would have really benefited from is kind of a test run with the entire organization. All right, for the next half an hour, go out here and hit this page and do stuff and see how it goes. Because there was no real tool for us to use to do that, or at least not one we knew about.
Not one in the organization already that you could spin up and use, right?
Right. But when we realized we had to move that bracket and semicolon down 3 lines to fix the entire issue, that was one of the best moments of my life.
It's wonderful when you can fix 120 people's problems in one change, right?
Yeah.
It's just so much relief. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary about the making of Jaws.
No.
But the mechanical
was there
shark.
stress? Yeah. Bruce, right?
Bruce was like, just didn't work. And they just like worked on fixing that shark through like so much of the schedule. And then one day, all of a sudden, the shark is working. The shark is working. And like that moment, it's like, thank goodness. So I say that a lot, and people don't know why I'm saying the shark is working, but I do still say it and assume it's just for me. My reference is just for me.
It's important to have those, though.
Yeah.
But
I have, it's when you see, like, you're looking at a group of developers sitting in the same cube area, whatever. It's not unheard of to see someone like jump up and like raise their hands in the air and cheer.
Yes.
Like
I've
for
been
no
there
apparent
before.
reason.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you have that moment where you figure something out.
Yeah. And the shark starts working. That is the best feeling ever.
Right. And that feeling is better after day one of a release because there's more pressure and the stuff's not working. And now like management, leadership is involved and knows about it. And, there's people at up the chain that are noticing. And so there's a lot more pressure and concern and frenzy. But at that point, it's all hands on deck. Like, what do we got to do to fix it?
I've certainly been in the case where that's been round robin server reboots, right? The day after release, you're okay.
Yes.
After an hour, this server gets rebooted. Then an hour later, this other server gets rebooted. Then an hour later, this third server gets rebooted, and repeat until we fix this problem.
We had servers on a timer job to restart every night because of a memory leak issue.
Yeah.
Where it's just throughout the day, things got slower and slower.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to figure out what that was about. I've had that situation. And that's just it is don't expect things to work perfectly, and don't expect that on day one, you've thought of everything.
Can't possibly.
We're human beings.
Yeah.
And we're inherently flawed. Perception is inherently, like, storage of memory and all these things we're inherently flawed.
Well, and I think that's so important to remember, especially when we're talking about tech, because as consumers, it can be really easy to get frustrated with something like this website isn't loading or the navigation is confusing. It's like, well, somebody made that So yeah, it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
But Peter, to your point, like, okay, do we have a rollback? Or if we don't have a rollback, do we have like a fallback? Like, what's the equivalent of the alt text on images that are supposed to display? Like, are there things that we can go to make sure the critical functionality continues so that it buys us time to get, the sprinkles on top, the shark working? There we go. I'll go back to yours, Kyle.
And then, if you can and work through it, it's always nice to roll a certain number of percentage of your usage onto the new system.
Yep.
And still have the old system, and sort of, if you can, roll forward instead of dead man switch forward,
Yeah.
Like, it's so much nicer to just kind of, okay, we're going live. Okay. Still everything's fine. Okay. 50%, everything's fine. You're 60%, you watch the needles move and everything stays within the green zone, and you go live that way. That's the best. Rollback is another nice thing to have, but I mean, I'm certain all three of us have been in the situations where A, there was no rollback, B, there was no slow move. It was throw the switch, and you are going forward regardless, right? You are going to make fixes until it works, because there's no going back, and you better hope that you can fix the data after the fact.
Yes.
Yeah, you're in the boat.
Yeah.
And you got to fix the boat you're in
before you go over the waterfall.
While you're going,
And hopefully nobody's drilling holes
while you're
in the
driving
behind you as you go.
Yeah. The boat's moving somewhat, but you're headed for the rocks. I had sometimes at one time in particular, there was a launch, and then I was brought in after the launch to fix the entire intranet site, in real time, while they were using it.
Easy.
Because day one, the team left, it was an outside team. They left.
Where'd they go?
And they were done.
Wow.
And I was brought in, and I was told that we just want you to fix it. We don't want you to ask about the project.
Yep.
We don't, just fix it. We know it's bad. Just fix it, and don't talk to us about it. And I was like, yeah, okay. I'm like, I am your willing servant. I serve at the pleasure of my customer.
Right.
I'm the merc.
And then I open up and I start looking through things, and I realize that, creating the new site where every page is an iframe that shows the old page is not a new intranet. That migration approach, there was a key connection that didn't get made in someone's head.
Wow.
That when you shut the old server off, every single page in your intranet was going to be blank.
Oh.
Because you iframed the old one.
So
That's
I
cool.
had, we had a couple systems engineers available, and me, and I had to train them on how we're going to fix it.
Yep.
And we in 2 or 3 days, we had it fixed. And it was just hammering away at it. Okay, we've got the HTML code for the old place. We got to bring in all the artifacts that it links to and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
We came up with a plan. It was you're brought in at panic mode.
Yeah.
You're fighting a fire. And it's amazing what you can accomplish with that much adrenaline. And Like that kind of, you've got this wall just shoving you forward.
Yep.
And you have to, and like my experience as a waiter really came in handy. Like
I have no doubt.
My
yeah.
section is slammed. I'm in the weeds. All I got to do is run.
Mm-hmm.
Like just run. And time, you don't notice time passing. You don't you're just in the moment. And then you can accomplish a lot of stuff in that short period of time. And then you need like 4 days of rest after it's all done.
Well, do you remember the cartoon Underdog?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So it starts with a scream for help, right?
Yeah.
Somebody scream for help. Underdog comes in, tries to save the day, doesn't quite work. Then realizes, oh yeah, I've got this pill I got to take. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I don't start every adventure by taking the pill, but I don't. I try it without first. Then I take the pill. And then, here I come to save the day. And you get a few of those cases after a release where you've come in, saved the day and your cape can flutter in the wind.
Yeah.
Then there are other times where you've got sort of the Incredibles no capes designer philosophy because, so-and-so sucked into a jet, so-and-so is, stuck here, all the different ways that the capes got in the way. And it's just kind of fun to sort of have that great experience like you were talking about, 3 days, never to happen again, probably could never repeat it even today, right?
Yeah.
It'd be hard to go.
A one-time anomaly.
Everything lined up and it just went shunk and it all came together and it was fine. And so it's such a wonderful feeling, and to have that and to hold on to it, but also to not go in expecting that feeling at the start of every project, right?
Totally. There's so many little things that we can pull, Kyle, from your story, which is, make sure your contracts keep your consultants, contractors, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Past the delivery date.
I've never walked out of a place after pushing the release button.
No.
And been like, see ya. All right. Have a good. Oh, everything's fine.
Yeah. Like,
see you later.
Peter, to what you said, like, no, you're not expecting that to happen, but have a certain amount of sanity that bad things are possible. And so you need to have people there who can take care of the problem. And then when they bring you in, Kyle, it's having someone who knows how to do the work, having of a group of people, at least one person who can expedite, basically, like triage everything and, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move forward, and manage that kind of high level communication and progress monitoring.
Right.
And then frankly, I actually like that when you went in, Kyle, that they said, don't ask us about the project, just get it back working.
That was freedom.
It's great. Yeah. And that's why it
cleared up a lot of like overhead.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because that ultimately, that's not the problem right now. That's not what's on fire. And that's why I really do love at organizations. I know this can be a big disclaimer, but at organizations with a decently healthy culture, having postmortems are great, because then you just know, okay, we're going to talk about how we got here later. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to focus on the problem at hand.
Let's not have 10 meetings to talk about who to fire over this. Let's get the site going, and then we'll have a nice talk about what went wrong, and maybe, we'll figure out not to do it again and not do it that way.
And when we have
backup like entry mechanism to our server rooms, because this badge system, if that's the only way in, if we're bringing in angle grinders, like unless we're going to issue angle grinders right away to that team,
hey, that'd be a nice perk.
Yeah.
Maybe I think small key hanging on a hook somewhere.
Taking that approach on yourself of, I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to want, like, I'm not going to go, who did this? Like, why is this like this? Why is that like that? Because you can do that all day long. It's
There's a million
easy
ways
to
to do
go in
software
behind
development.
someone else's work.
And somebody else is going to be doing that with my code, with your code.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
doing
not-
it with my code sometimes after the fact.
yes.
I don't
There
know what I
was a
was thinking there.
reason. There was a reason at the time why they did what they did.
Of
It made
course.
sense. They agreed on it. There was a reason they chose a platform. There was a reason they decided not to like add resources or whatever.
Well, it's
And
like
it's like that
what
ship
our-
is all sailed.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of the things we touched on with the previous Ted Lasso episode, with just people by and large have good intentions, and
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
that in mind.
Nobody goes around
Yeah.
high-fiving saying, I came up with the worst possible way to do this. Look at this
Yeah.
code. Isn't it horrible?
Yeah. I have
Unless it's a
I
Reddit
have
challenge.
made in my career, I have made every blunder. Like every even obvious ones.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have made every mistake. And one of the ones I learned early when I was just doing tech support was don't trash their stuff. When you go in, don't go, oh, you're using this? Oh, this thing, I hate this thing.
Right. I'm getting rid of that.
Because they're invested in it. They picked that for whatever reason. Or they were sold. Maybe they were sold a bill of goods. Maybe they
Sure.
got duped. And they're embarrassed by it. And it's like the last thing you want to do is embarrass people. And that stuff can.
And
Yep.
especially when you're talking about a post-deployment fire too. Like, you don't need to take the time to shame somebody right now.
Right.
Get it working.
Right. We should never
Yeah.
have used Tool X here because Tool X is horrible for this.
Like,
Great.
thank you,
Oh.
Captain Hindsight.
Yes.
Yeah. A major choice. And then it's like, when we print this, the text is getting cut off because it's not doing page breaks. Okay. The tool doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
The tool we chose, the big, like, this is what's going to let us do this. This is the whole ball game here,
Yeah.
is printing this thing out at the end. And it's cutting off text. And that one little thing, and then it's just your heart sinks and you just shake your head, and then you're scrambling, and like that stuff's going to happen.
Definitely.
And, I always think like, I try to be a forgiving person and understand that people are human and flawed and make mistakes, or just don't think of every possible thing, because this stuff is complex. It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. And so you try not, if you can give yourself the same amount of grace you would give other people in the same situation,
Sure.
that's really helpful.
Mhm.
But it's rare that you do that. You're just hammering on yourself, beating yourself up for something. And yeah.
So I'm wondering, we kind of talked about some of the technical aspects of things you can do to help make things easier. We've touched a little bit on like project development techniques. Like, Peter, in your experience, are there things that the people who aren't the developers or the people who aren't the ops team that they do or don't do on a deploy +1 fire that can make your life better or worse?
It's always nice to get that communication going at the start beforehand, instead of
Sure.
having somebody go, oh yeah, I changed that one thing. Since we were doing a deployment anyway, I made this one change that, I'll bet that's what did that. Oh yeah, I bet the 16 releases you've made in the last 2 hours, those maybe didn't work because I had this one thing that I forgot to mention to anybody and didn't document it. And those are fun.
I mean, deployments are always better when they're bigger.
Yeah.
Add more.
And right, to your point, like make it as small as you can, right? And that's, I think, where Agile really comes in and shines, is it's a small release.
What's the minimum, what's it called? Minimum viable product.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like what's going to get the job done? And then, because what happens, at least at least on my projects, is at the beginning when you're talking through it, you'll have this meeting or meetings that I call Christmas morning, and that's where people are like, oh, this is, if we could do this, and what if it could do that, and it's like, what if it could save me 2 minutes a year? It's like, well, to do that's going to take, $20,000.
Right.
What's your time worth?
Yeah.
But it's, you get in that feature storm, and it's like, okay, this is all great stuff. We're going to record all of this, and then we're going to do the minimum viable project.
Then we'll prioritize it and do it in the right order.
Yeah, because I've had a handful of times over the years where something has been deployed, and then halfway through the next day I get an email from a team I've never heard of and people I've never worked with saying they thought that the deployment was going to be for a mansion and instead it's a shack.
Right.
And your heart just sinks because it's just, that's another thing for me, in addition to the smaller deployments with Agile, but just the idea that you are having conversations with people from soup to nuts throughout that process. So you're hopefully catching those people who are going to be using whatever you're developing, and they don't have to wait for production to go live to find out if what we built matches what they were imagining.
Right. Yeah, that's another disappointing thing, and it is sort of their imagination of what it was going to be and what you produced, which was what you were asked to produce, right? It is exactly the shack that you were told to build, because
exactly
the mansion had been changed about 6 months ago to a shack, not a mansion. And it's going back and having everybody involved really makes a difference. Going back to your point about sort of DevOps and other things, if you can practice a release before doing a release, that makes the release plus one so much better. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we failed to release this product 20 times in a row, and we released it successfully twice in a row, and that was the last 2 times, but we did the same thing both times. We're pretty sure the third time when we do this in production, we'll be successful. Yep. And if it's not, we have 20 examples of things that we know how to fix.
And better logging.
And better logging. Yes, much better logging.
For that, and that going to day one is this huge handoff to the business.
It can be.
Yes. Yeah.
And it might dramatically change the way they do their work. It might require them to have some new skills, and like most of my projects had a big communication and change management component to it.
Yeah.
And you have to involve the business early, and they have to be a part of it.
And part of the reason for going live on that particular date is that it's been communicated for the last 6 months that we're doing this on that date.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you kind of don't have the flexibility anymore.
Well,
and there's
go ahead.
Go ahead. The thing you're delivering, one thing that you can get in trouble with is post-launch tweaks.
Yeah.
We're gonna add a tab. We're gonna move this thing, especially with the UI. And it's like you're training and teaching on this interface, and it's enough to just have to make that change, and all of a sudden, like, what happened to this thing?
Right.
It was there a week ago.
Now I get to rewrite all my training documents. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
This
So
is
you
why I
really
don't-
need to run with what you did, unless it's an emergency thing. It's like, no, we need to roll with this and see how it works. All that pre-planning or planning stuff that we do, part of UI UX, user journey mapping, and it's to understand the business, understand the users, account for all the users, try to build something that's going to complement the way they do their work and what needs to happen. And then you got to roll that out. And if it's replacing something, that's a much bigger deal than just an add-on to the other stuff.
Right.
What's even harder is we're gonna give you something that we want you to use. That's the new way of doing things, but you're still going to be able to do things the old way.
Yeah. Until we
know.
rip that band. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
rip the Band-Aid off, or do you just slowly peel it off?
Yeah, here's some
Yeah.
overlap time. The other thing that I try and keep in mind is, and why it's so important to have a successful deploy and to try to minimize, production incidents as much as possible, is that at the bare bones, these projects need to get funded somehow.
Yes.
And if they don't go well, that can very likely decrease the new interesting projects that might be coming down the pipeline.
Very true.
So it's even just selfishly, it's in my best interest to do a good job, because that means I will get interesting work down the road.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Everybody
loves it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
They benefit from it. They like it. It went well. And they know there's more things they can do that are going to kind of carry them forward and move the business forward.
Yeah. And if there are more people across your organization that have a positive experience with tools they're using or changes that are happening, the more they're going to reach out for, hey, could you help me with this? Or I want to be involved in the next project to help make sure we have this feature, which is great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that kind of soft launch, trying to get the surprises to surface ahead of time, and identify maybe people we forgot. Like there's a team over here in the corner of 2 people that really cared about this functionality in the old system. And now that's buried. It's really different. It doesn't exist. Like
they use it once a month to do critical things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we forgot.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like, how do you make sure you see the whole picture?
Right.
Yeah. Easily,
Easily.
I'm stumped. I still don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we all continue to learn, and why we work in teams. Just the more perspectives we can get, like, okay, now I'm actually starting to get a better picture of things, because I'm not going to think of everything. No way.
Well, and not every release goes poorly, right? So if you've been on,
very true.
If starting your career, you've been on 3 beautiful, perfect releases, you think that's how it goes, right?
Yes.
And if you're someone like me that has had, a few go lives that, actually rolled back before they went live, like, oh, oops, we forgot about that. All right, we're just going to slowly pull this back and fix it, and then we'll do another release next week. It'll be like the same, like we practiced, but this time for real.
And I think understanding that that's part of the project is scrambling week 1 to make it right.
Yeah, it can be.
And because there's a good chance that you're going to have to do that. It's like, okay, that's the, and if I'm walking out the door right before day one hits,
right.
I'm watching my email, my phone is on,
Nobody
I'm
walks out
paying
the door.
attention, and like I will kick in, answer like whatever I got to do. That service after the sale
Right.
is important. Being available, and understanding that just because they thought you were done doesn't mean necessarily that you're done.
No, no.
Mm-mm.
And, I always wonder sort of what code did I leave in place that only I know about
Yes.
that somebody will need to fix or change in 6 months? And will I remember it still enough to help them?
Yeah.
I've sent many emails out weeks later because I thought of something.
Right. Oh yeah, by the way, don't ever touch that button.
Yeah.
Put the tape on it.
You know what? This is how you update this thing. If
Right.
you need to add, like, if you need to add categories, this is how you do it. And I didn't document it, so I'm doing it now.
Right.
Yeah, it's a ramp. It's a down ramp. It's not a cliff. It's
No.
Hope not.
Like you were saying, Kyle, walking out the door, looking over your shoulder. I've seen a number of folks run out the door as fast as they can because they know the fuse has been lit and they're gonna get as far away as possible.
Yep.
scorched earth, and you are never going back.
No.
That's it. That's only gonna further, like, you're avoiding a temporary discomfort for a much longer term set of consequences.
Yeah.
Right.
I like the feeling of, wow, that was really a cool thing we did for them.
Yeah.
And I hope we can do more.
So much more fun to walk out and to think of the thing and email them back. And they're like, oh, we never thought we'd hear back from you, but thanks. We appreciate getting that message. And, oh, we had this one other question. Can you help us with that? Oh, sure. No problem.
Then, like the great moments after stuff like that is it's 10 years later. We're still using it. It works great. It's gone through 3 upgrades.
Yep.
Since then, and like no problems. Like then you're just in heaven as a developer. You're like, oh, that is so cool. I'm glad it's still working for you because it means that you've gotten that much use out of it.
Right.
And it was all really worth it.
And that there were clear instructions for, okay, here are some things to watch out for, down the road or keep in mind.
Yeah.
Long-term
that is the best. Yeah. The best feeling to hear that.
Yeah. I tell you, and there's, as consultants, when you're done with the project, your job is to put yourself out at work.
Yep.
Right.
At that client, and where you have nothing left to do for them. The project's done, your work is done. You get to ride off into the sunset, and you're not there for the growth and the boom and the excitement of maybe something awesome that you did for them.
Right.
You don't get to stay for that. And that can kind of be, you could wonder for years how that really went. And, I built a really simple form, quote form, that got emailed to a contractor, like a request for quote, on his website. And 3 years later, I saw him like in a restaurant or on the street, whatever. And he said, I get 90% of my business through that thing.
Ah, nice.
I was like, where have you been for 3 years? Like,
busy working.
Yeah.
I got all
Hey,
this
better-
business now.
better late than never.
For so much longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any parting thoughts on day one?
Hopefully it goes well. If it doesn't go well, it will be okay.
Yeah.
Plan to fail. Don't fail to plan.
There we go. That's a much better bumper sticker.
If you don't master your fear, fear will become your master. All right. With that, that was the SDG podcast. Thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to us, drop us an email at thepodcasters@solutiondesign.com. Until next time, say goodbye, everybody.
Ciao.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.